97.3 ESPN.com Eagles insider John McMullen and national columnist covering the NFL for FanRag Sports NFL. John McMullen joins us now on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. What's going on, my man?
Hello, gents. Thanks for having me.
Yes, indeed. It's a wet, nasty day up there, but they got to get these in because Thursday it all starts here. But let's look at the weekend there. What was it? 30,000 people came out to watch practice yesterday?
36,000.
Holy mackerel.
So it's, that's a pretty impressive turnout. And just tells you, I mean, obviously the city is football crazy to begin with, but I think the excitement is starting to mount.
Is this something other teams do, John? Do other teams do something like this in their stadiums where they have open practices?
Not many do it in the big stadium. Green Bay does, and obviously they generally draw a sellout, but everybody usually, the teams that go off campus certainly have them in the smaller stadiums, and they have those night practices. So everybody usually does one or two big practices, but the Eagles, ever since they've shifted things away from Lehigh and back to the NovaCare complex, they have one of the biggest because they open the link up and you get almost 40,000 fans. So that's pretty impressive for watching football practice.
Unbelievable. Some of the highlights of Sunday were?
Well, I think Sunday, Carson Wentz was extremely, extremely sharp, really throwing the football well, especially down the field. Just one of his best practices since he's been here. And to do it, obviously, in front of everyone, that generates a lot of excitement. I think he took kind of a step back today, but you almost have to. He was so sharp on Sunday. And, that's I think when you talk about any young quarterback, that's sort of the landmark you strive for is the consistency from day to day. And Carson has been relatively consistent throughout the summer, but you still see some of the ups and downs, and today was a bit of a down, maybe going from the link to the bubble, and the short quarters, the small quarters had something to do with it, but either way, he was really impressive on Sunday.
What are some of the things he's doing better?
Well, I think his accuracy down the field has been a lot better this year than it was last year, certainly at the end of last year, which I think he was banged up. I think he threw the ball so much, and the fact that receivers weren't that effective and weren't able to get open downfield, all of that kind of contributed to it. And now all of a sudden you have this much improved receiving group that's generally been dominating in practice, and you have the cornerbacks who have struggled. And you have some separation, and he's gaining confidence. So we'll see how that develops. Now, I mean, as you start, obviously, getting against other opponents, you're going to see different bodies. You're going to see upgraded secondaries, and we'll see if it carries over.
Talk with John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. Of course, yesterday the Eagles in front of, as John said, 36,000 at open practice there. Obviously, you mentioned Wentz there, and everybody always has their eyes on him. But another name that we've been talking a lot about is Nelson Agholor. And today, Frank Reich kind of left the door open for Agholor to be a bigger part of the team's plans. It sounds like he's buying in.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are. And it was interesting because this is sort of, we got the old Nelson Agholor today. He was wide open. And that's the thing that's been most impressive about Nelson is he gets separation, and he gets it consistently from day to day, more separation than any other receiver, including Alshon Jeffrey. And he was streaking to the end zone, and Carson hit him in stride. Boom, off the pads, just dropped the football. So it was interesting that Frank was so effusive at this practice after we kind of saw that. But overall, if you go back to the spring, he has been very, very good, and he's made plays consistently, and that's what he mentioned. He Frank Reich said, I think the defense knows when he's out there because he's been so effective, and it's been big strikes down the field, and he has caught it more consistently. But at the same time, he's not the big-time Alshon Jeffrey type receiver who catches everything. There's just going to be inconsistency from time to time. He's going to drop the football. It looks like that's never going to change.
How much of this possibly is Jordan Matthews' knee? How much is his contract situation?
I think most of it's his contract situation. I think the loggerheads is, if you look at Jordan Matthews' production through his first three receivers, through his first three seasons, it's been very good. And part of that is early. Chip Kelly's offense in general tends to inflate numbers. Part of it is he was the best receiver of a bad lot, obviously. And I think from the Eagles' perspective, I always say they look at it like he was sort of a scorer on a bad NBA team. And the fact that somebody had to get the numbers. And they don't necessarily see him as a one or even a second wide receiver, but he wants to be paid like that because he has produced from his side of the fence. So I think that contract issue is kind of what is fueling all of this, because Jordan wants to be paid like a one or more likely a number two receiver, and the Eagles see him as a role player. And you can see from that standpoint how that would be difficult to hammer out a contract. And this is his final year on his rookie deal. And if he can't get something done, obviously he's going to move on. So the Eagles are sort of trying to walk that tightrope, have a productive player for this season, maybe continue to negotiate, maybe get something done down the line. But if not, somebody else has got to step up, and that somebody is presumably going to be Nelson Agholor.
And I also see you writing at 97.3 ESPN.com. Shelton Gibson maybe turned the corner a little bit. Also, you had Torrey Smith today kind of limping off here. So wideout's still a big story.
Yeah, it is. And for the most part, it's been a positive one, though. Shelton's been one of the guys who hasn't. And it's almost a bizarre turnaround because I'm telling you, this guy caught nothing. He was dropping easy passes. And the past 2 days, starting at Lincoln Financial Field and today, he's catching everything. They're just
hey, I could vouch for Gibson that he could catch the ball. I mean, I've watched the guy play for a couple of years, man. And to hear what he was going through was surprising to me. Now, I know college and pros are different, but catching the ball should be something similar.
Yeah, I mean, he was making routine drops in individual drills throughout the spring and early in training camp. And yesterday he made a comeback where he jumped over the defensive back. Tremendous catch. He laid out completely to catch the ball at the link. The fans were able to see. Today he made another great catch on the far sideline. So maybe he was having sort of a little Agholor-type hiccup, and he was struggling with his confidence, and perhaps he has turned that corner because he's looked like a completely different guy the past 2 days, but the hole he dug for himself may be a little too deep because this team is it's weird to say because it shifted so much over one off season, but this team all of a sudden is very, very deep at the wide receiver position.
Hey, John, if you could kind of give us a handicap of I know you wrote about Jim Schwartz not really committing to any of the corners, but anybody starting to pick it up, anybody separating themselves, Patrick Robinson, C.J. Smith, Rasul Douglas, what's Jalen Mills, what's the story with them?
Patrick Robinson was the story today. He had his best day of camp by far. I mean, he has struggled. He's sort of been the defensive version of Shelton Gibson, but it's even more of an issue because he's supposed to be a starter. He's been getting beaten consistently day in and day out, and today something happened. He jumped an out pattern to Torrey Smith. It would have been a pick six from Carson Wentz. He had another interception at the goal line that he dropped. Just very, very effective today. His best day, and I'm sure Jim Schwartz is going to be thrilled when he starts watching the film. Maybe it's just turning it around. Maybe it's learning the defense. Maybe it's becoming more comfortable. I think the signing of Corey Graham, though, is interesting because I think if he's got anything left physically, I think this is a clear indication that this team is going to shift in a different direction and go to sort of a big nickel package where they put 3 safeties on the field. It seems to happen every year. A couple of years ago with Chip Kelly, he tried 1,000 bodies, it seemed, at the nickelback slot in training camp, and all of a sudden week 1 shows up and Malcolm Jenkins is in the slot. And last year it was Ron Brooks, and then after he got hurt, it was Malcolm in the slot. I think if Corey Graham has anything left, I think ultimately it's going to play out as having him back in the slot and having Rodney McLeod and Corey Graham be the safeties in the nickel package.
Corey Graham playing safety for the practice there. How about, looking at Ron Brooks, too? Has he been able to keep himself out there?
Well, I think the most positive thing about Ron Brooks is he's practiced every day.
Right, yeah.
And I think that's a very big surprise coming off the injury, ruptured quad that he had. I just assumed the Eagles would give him a maintenance day every once in a while just to try to keep him as healthy as possible. But he hasn't asked for one. He hasn't needed one. He's been out there. Jim has been very cautious, though, because I think he's like most of the other corners who struggled a bit and said it's still a process as far as him getting back completely healthy. But he's been out there, and that part of it alone is a big plus.
We're talking with John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. Eagles at practice getting ready for their first preseason game coming up on Thursday night right here on 97.3 ESPN. And what do you anticipate happens in that game? Do you think we'll see? Did they give any indication today that Carson Wentz and any of the first-teamers would be out there?
No, you know how they are with that. They haven't had the discussion yet. I imagine if you see Carson Wentz, it'll be for one series, and that's it. It'll be a cameo, so tune in quickly if you want to see him. Frank Reich spoke today, did mention that he doesn't expect Carson to play much at all in the preseason. That's not a surprise to me as well. You're going to see a lot of Matt McGloin and Dane Evans because Nick Foles is still not back from his elbow soreness. He hasn't practiced in over a week now, so it's going to be the Matt McGloin and Dane Evans show.
Today, it was a little bit of the Chance Warmack show, getting some work with the first team at both left guard and right guard. And do you still think that he's got a shot to win a starting job, specifically at the left spot, right?
No, they're very happy with Isaac Seumalo. He's going to be the starter at left guard. Brandon Brooks left practice early today. Nothing serious from anything that can be surmised, and that's why I was seeing a lot of first-team work at right guard once Brooks kind of tapped out. Every once in a while they'll do that. They'll give somebody a rep. You'll see Vaitai now come in for Jason Peters on the left side or Dylan Gordon, something of that nature. But Warmack is going to make this team now that Alan Barber's gone, but he's certainly not pushing for one of the starting jobs.
Yeah, I know you look at the offensive line, they're very steady on that offensive line front. We've talked a lot about how good they are, but would you say that this is a good pass protecting line? Because they seem like a pretty good offensive line in terms of the run game, but I don't know how good with Blunt, is this going to be a team that relies on that offensive line in the run blocking game with LeGarrette Blunt now?
Well, I've said a lot. I hope they run it more. I think they need to run it more. I think they certainly have players who can run block very well. Specifically, Jason Peters and Brooks are tremendous at the point of attack as far as strength goes. And then there's other guys. Jason Kelsey would be a better pass protector than a run blocker. Lane can do both, and I don't think we know enough about Isaac Seumalo yet, but he is very intelligent. He's very athletic, and normally when coaches talk that way, you tend to be a better pass blocker than a run blocker. And then there's also the natural sort of, when people talk about Jason Peters, they talk about old man strength, and it's sort of like young players need a while before they can really get in the weight room and become as strong as some of these veteran NFL interior players. So it's too early to tell, but I would lean towards Sayamala is going to be better as a pass blocker than a run blocker. But either way, the Eagles should be able to do both because they have, as I've stated for a while, they have a very good offensive line.
I know, we lost Corey Graham at safety, but yesterday Jim Sports, or I guess it was yesterday, right? Yeah, that he spoke yesterday was his day to speak, and he was asked a lot about Graham and whether or not they're going to start him at corner, but did they have thoughts of even giving him a shot? They're going to start him at safety. They have thoughts of even giving him a shot at corner?
I don't think so. I mean, he moved from corner 3 years ago, and he's 32. It's generally not when you go back. So I think it's going to be more trying to feel out how much does he have left physically. If he does, I think, as I said before, I think they're going to go to that sort of 3 safety package they used the past couple seasons a lot. But this time they'll be more comfortable with it. Jim actually mentioned they were forced into it last year after Ron Brooks was injured. I don't think he's all that confident in Jalen Watkins. He likes Terrence Brooks' physicality, but as far as coverage goes, he's not a great coverage safety. So now all of a sudden you have Graham, who's got corner ability when it comes to covering, but he's lost a step or two, and that's generally when you move back to safety. So I think they'll feel more comfortable going to that 3 safety package and putting Malcolm in the slot and letting Graham take over at safety. But that's what you have the preseason for. They have to sort of gauge pretty quickly how much Corey Graham has left physically.
Alshon Jeffrey resumed practicing. Do you anticipate seeing much of him during preseason?
No, I do not. I wouldn't be surprised if he's putting bubble wrap. If you do see him, I would imagine it would be a cameo in the 3rd preseason game. But that's one guy, and they've been kind of above board about it, is that they want to get to week 1 completely healthy with Alshon Jeffrey. And I know there's a chemistry aspect to it, and you'd like to see how the new pieces fit in the preseason, but that's just not what the NFL is today. The NFL is more about getting guys, as I said, healthy to the regular season, because it's just almost a mental hurdle. Obviously, you can get hurt anytime playing football. It could be in practice, could be non-contact. But there's just something worse about losing a guy in the preseason. Yeah. At least if you lose him in the regular season, you kind of feel like you did it fighting for something worthwhile. And that seems to be the mentality across the league.
Yeah, and your news today that the Jets had a bad team anyway. Now their number 1 wide receiver, Quincy Enunwa, he's lost for the season as well with a neck injury. You're right. These guys get hurt in training camp, and it's like, man, I mean, you hate to hear that these guys are getting hurt before the season even starts, but the Jets season going to be even worse now without their number 1 wide receiver.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of it, and I don't want to criticize Quincy because it's obviously sad when anybody goes down. But the fact that Quincy Enunwa is your wide receiver 1 tells you you're a really bad football team to begin with. And now that they've lost him, it's going to be bad for the New York Jets this season.
Jay Cutler, the new starting quarterback in Miami.
Yeah, I mean, perfect fit. Obviously, in a lot of ways, I wrote about that today on FanRag Sports. In a lot of ways, he's the reason Adam Gase is the coach in Miami. I mean, that's when he sort of took off as a hot head coaching candidate, and I believe the Eagles wanted him first. and sort of he went to Miami because at the time, remember, I think there was a couple reasons. Obviously, you have no state taxes in Florida, so that helps from a financial standpoint. The weather's better. But also, the Eagles weren't in the Carson Wentz business at that point. And Miami had the better quarterback situation. And I think that's the reason he chose the Dolphins. It was trending in the right direction until Tannehill got hurt last December. But, you know, Jay Cutler's got tremendous arm talent. We all know that. He had his best season with Adam Gase as his coordinator. In a lot of ways, I think for what Adam wants to do offensively, he might be a better fit than Ryan Tannehill was.
Yeah, not surprising at all with that deal. But do you think that a lot of people question, Cutler's passion and, look, the heart? They do it basically by reading his body language or his facial expressions. Adam Gase has become pretty well-respected guy in one season, and Miami getting them to 10 wins in the playoffs. Do you think this answers those questions? Do you think Adam Gase is saying, look, I know this guy. I don't have those questions?
Well, he doesn't have those questions, but yeah, I mean, if you check Twitter right now, you'll see all the memes of Jay Cutler. He's just got that face. He's got that droopy dog face, where he always looks like he's angry or peeved off about something. And it's something he's dealt with his entire career. He doesn't seem. I think it's fair to say he's had bad body language a lot over his career. I think that part of it's fair. But people who know him claim he's a competitor. He's a tough guy. He fights through injuries. I think a lot of it is unfair. But he'll have his chance. In a lot of ways, I compared it to Jeff George. I think he's this generation's Jeff George, who was always labeled as an underachiever, was regarded as a bad leader, bad body language, but he had this just unbelievable ability to throw the football, and he kind of caught fire the year after Randall Cunningham went in the tank. He had that 1 year with Minnesota, and I think the same thing could happen with Jay Cutler in Miami. It's obviously going to be short term because he's 34 years old, but he can make every throw there is, and few can match him as far as arm talent goes.
A couple other quick hits here with John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. Anquan Bolden. Josh is having a parade over there. Anquan Bolden finally signed. He's going to Buffalo, so another signing, a veteran, bigger-name guy. You're starting to see some moves being made here. So Bolden in Buffalo today, and, you look at Bolden. He's a guy that I was surprised it was still out there this long.
Yeah, he's like the offensive version of Dwight Freeney. They always sign late, and they're always good. I think it's just the mentality in the NFL. You don't want older receivers. It's considered a thoroughbred position, but when Bolden was young, he couldn't run. And in a lot of ways, he was like Chris Carter in that way, because that was never really that big of an impact on his game. He's a great route runner. He might have the strongest hands in football. He just tears it away from defensive back.
Right.
As far as a slot receiver that can move the chains, he's as, you can count on him. He's going to get open. He's going to catch the football. And I'm with you. I'm always surprised it takes as long as it does, but that's just the way the NFL thinks. They don't want older receivers.
At JF McMullen on Twitter, you read his story about Jay Cutler returning to the NFL, and more on the Eagles at practice. Of course, the Eagles take on the Packers Thursday night right here on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Mike.